Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
Alrighty, we are calling this meeting to order at 3:53 p.m. We have a new committee member. We are so glad to welcome Chibusu as a new committee member to the Healthy Neighborhoods Advisory Committee. Welcome. We are so glad to have you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Agenda item number 2, approval of minutes. Are there any questions or discussion on the previous minutes? Obviously, you were not part of it, Chibuzu, and so anybody else had any questions or discussion items? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the previous agenda minutes?
So moved.
Any seconds?
Second.
Amazing. So moved by Mr. Hamilton and seconded by Mr. O'Toole. And anybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
Caitlin?
Sorry, we said it at the same time. Aye.
Oh, okay, wonderful. Aye. Okay, anybody opposed? There's no one left to oppose. Okay, motion carries. Unanimous. Agenda item number 3, public appearances for non-agenda items. There's no one in the room. There's no one online. Jessica, are you aware of anybody? Amazing. Agenda item number 4, agenda review. Would anybody like to either add items or rearrange items on today's agenda? Hearing none, let's move on to agenda item number 5. 5A, Resolution R19624, adopting and approving the City of Fitchburg Strategic Plan. This agenda item was postponed from our February 25th, postponed from the Common Council meeting. Okay. That was on February 25th, 2025, because we were waiting for the latest version from the, what's the word I'm looking for? Consultant, thank you, from the consultant, which was sent out in the agenda packet. Hopefully everybody got a chance to review that. So let's now open discussion for the strategic plan version 2.
It's on. I'll start off what I was sharing with Jessica before the meeting started. The consultant has identified 3 ranges of funding for things, and they range from under $100,000 for all of them to $460,000. One, nothing's been approved and voted on yet that I'm aware of, so it's kind of tough to say we support or don't support that unless we get in the weeds and pick the ones that seem to make the most sense. The second thing is, as I look at all this, it talks about a lot of training of city staff. I would also be of the opinion that our committee members would also probably benefit from some of that ongoing training. Now, that's my 2 cents, and I'm not putting that out for minutes or anything, but I think that makes some sense. And then the other thing is, where is the dollars coming from to fund this extra portion in our plan? Those are my questions of what's out there. So I just lay them out and we can take it from there or ignore them. Thank you.
You had 2 comments on money, but 1 comment on training, and I was hoping that you could clarify, are there any specific trainings that were identified in here, or like categories of training that you were thinking in particular that our committee members would benefit from?
I would have to go back and look at that again, but I was just looking at training in general. Each section said training, and I'm trying to call the thing back up right now. So
Wonderful. While you look that back up, I had a very quick comment that I'll put on the record, which is that every time that this version of the strategic plan says healthy neighborhood, they actually mean priority neighborhood, and it should be updated as such. Now, I made this comment during the Community Equity Committee meeting as well, which also reviewed this document, but I'm going to make this comment here as well, that the priority neighborhoods, we have 4 priority neighborhoods. We want to turn them into healthy neighborhoods. They are not yet healthy neighborhoods. So just clarifying the language.
Deanna, please send me the document again. I can't find it.
Jeremy, if you share my screen, I have the document pulled up. Hold on, I need to change my settings, it looks like. Or no. I don't see anything on the... Oh, okay. All right. Okay, Mark, I've got it pulled up here, if that helps you.
Yeah, so as you go down there, it's where it's in the yellow section, so keep on going down if you wouldn't mind. Maybe I can answer Ari's question, but as you get into still going down. Okay, hold on. Keep going. Okay, so there's where it starts talking about training. But if you keep going down, it gets more into the weeds with it's all yellow. Okay, so where's the cost thing that's going on there? Cost. Okay, there where it starts getting into cost. So it talks about goal 1, and then it goes into goal 2, goal 3, goal 4. So that's what the point I was raising is that where's that money going to come from with these 3, and what levels have been approved? And obviously, nothing's been approved yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So I don't know what the rest of you think about that, but there's three or four more of those. 1, 2, 3. There's 5 of those in total that add up to the round I was quoting early on. You've got a robust, a mid-range, and affordable.
So maybe when we make any sort of recommendations to council, we should add a caveat of, we're uncertain of how we can evaluate this plan when we don't understand the funding sources or the tier levels as far as, can we practically do tier 1 versus tier 2 versus tier 3?
I think that is the correct statement on how to look at this. I mean, I would agree 100%. It's rather confusing.
Okay. I'll let you write that down and then.
Jessica, do you have any update on this, how this is getting discussed throughout the city?
I do not have any update on how it's being discussed throughout the city, but I can ask and get back with you.
So Jessica, when you're done with that, can you scroll to page 27, which I think is where Mark was talking about. It starts talking about it starts talking about training. So I'm talking about goal 4, train staff in the pursuit of equitable data-driven performance management. So I think that this is the section where we're talking about training.
Here we go.
Okay.
So as we look at this, I now finally got my info up. This has been referred to us, the Equity Committee, and it's gone there twice, and it's down to us back the second time. So are we going to take action on this, or theirs just has discussion only, no action taken? Yeah.
The plan was for a motion to be made and action to be taken, but ultimately, it's up to you.
Okay, well, I'm still curious to understand more about training, but while we're waiting on more information there, I would like to make a recommendation for objective 2.1. So if you scroll up quite a bit, objective 2.1.
What page? Oh,
So it talks about having interactive maps on the website. I love this idea. I would love to also somehow incorporate the requirement of having an interactive map of priority neighborhoods into this objective. I think that it would be really beneficial, not only for our residents to be able to understand where our priority neighborhoods are in the city, but also for any service providers to be able to really understand which which exact addresses are inside of a priority neighborhood versus which are not. And I think that this could be a really wonderful way to incorporate that useful information into our website through an interactive map. I'm recommending an additional map or an additional layer within a map. Any discussion or okay. I had a question on objective 2A, part B, subsection B. It says data measure, at least 2 new municipal assets are planned annually for high density areas. I was uncertain about, I guess, okay. So what would qualify as a municipal asset? Why is it important to have 2 new municipal assets within the high density areas? I'm interested in, go for it.
I think your municipal assets are defined in 2.1B. as parks, green space, community center style buildings. And yes, I cannot further clarify on where the minimum requirement of at least 2 or that requirement is coming from. But I'm sure this was something that was likely discussed in the city council prior to including that in here.
I'm kind of guessing that it wasn't. I'm kind of guessing that this is a total guess. I'm guessing that the consultant created the data measure out of thin air. That would be a new requirement of 2 new parks, 2 new green spaces for every high density area. I think that it would be worth discussing if that's, a great idea.
Absolutely. I think we can definitely highlight that.
Could I clarify, Ari? Are you asking us to look at whether or not we are in support of that, or are you just highlighting your support of that?
The first one. Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I guess, I could start with my opinion. My opinion would be that, for example, I would love to have playgrounds be maintained and updated. And, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're building new playgrounds. So I worry that this could be a focus on potentially not the right needs for our neighborhoods. I'm trying to understand what this means, like how many different high density areas are there. Yeah, I'm personally not a fan of this data measure. Put it that way.
I think we need to go back and ask the consultant where this stuff came from, because I'll give you my take on green space and parks. And I know in the city that they say more than once, we want to have a community park, a neighborhood park, or an area park within a short 10-minute walk from everybody, where everybody lives. And I don't know that there is that, but I do know I've seen that goal in the past. And I think that may be where it's coming from. But I think what I'm hearing, we got a lot of questions. And I think we need to go back, and Deanna's not here tonight. We need to go back and ask the consultant. It also sounds like the other committee did not, they had discussion only, correct? I'm looking at you, Jessica, I'm sorry. Yeah.
The equity committee.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think we need to get our questions out on the table and ask them to come back and clarify them for us as this goes forward. Or even ask for we lost you, Jeremy.
No, that's me.
Oh.
That's because
have a session with the other committee and talk about this stuff. So we're all together in the same room. It's going to cross boundaries. That's just an idea. But I think I'm just here. I'm not ready to support this and approve it till I have some answers, personally. The rest of the committee may be so, but I don't think we have. I don't know if the rest of you have answers or questions, but the more I look at this, we're digging into the weeds, and it would be nice to know where the stuff came from.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm really curious about the timeline of this document. I'm guessing, again, a lot of guesswork going on right now. I'm guessing that there's not really time in the timeline or budget to have the consultant come back, give clarifying answers in front of the committee or something, maybe we can email some questions to the consultant. I'm not sure that then there would be time for us to meet yet again and discuss this after the consultant gives us more answers, more clarification. I
Good point.
don't know.
That's a good point.
I don't know.
Maybe, is this under Deanna's?
Oh, your button.
Oh, sorry. Is this under Deanna? I'm looking at you, Jessica. Is this under Deanna's protege? She's running this plan?
No, this is the city plan. So Deanna's not running it. This was brought forth by the council, and then a consultant was hired, and Deanna and the department heads were a part of the planning process and spoke with the consultant, but the consultant created this plan in conjunction with the department heads, council. There were some focus groups last summer out within the city, but no one, to clarify, nobody within the city staff has created this plan.
I think her point's right, is that we may need to just raise the questions. If we can't have a meeting, that's fine, but I mean, is the group ready to approve this? Is that what we're supposed to do? The resolution's in front of us, and we haven't even gotten to that yet.
My recommendation would be to make a motion to approve with amendments. I should say proposed amendments.
Jessica, do you have any information that could help me understand how many high density areas there are? Or like, for example, here's a straightforward question. Is each one of our priority neighborhoods a separate high density area?
That's a great question that I don't know. I can ask. It would probably be Deanna that would know if each, I mean, a high density area, to my knowledge, it may not just be specific neighborhoods, but I can ask and get back with you.
I mean, I would kind of love the data measure of at least 2 municipal assets are either, created or maintained within each of our priority neighborhoods annually. That would be a lovely data measure that I would 100% support. I just truly do not understand this data measure. At least 2 new municipal assets are planned annually for high density areas. I don't understand it.
I will say this is for the entire city, so not just the priority neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So they're probably looking at future development because this is a 5-year plan.
I mean, that's great. I don't understand what a high density area is.
High density would be like apartment complexes that house, I want to say, upwards of 300 individuals. I don't know the technical term for high density. Again, I can talk with Deanna and she can explain that a little bit more to you.
So like, for example, Swan Creek is a new development and they probably have plenty of rich people there. They probably have plenty of municipal assets already. Belmar Renaissance on the Park, on the other hand, maybe not as many municipal assets, right? I'm wondering the benefit of treating areas like that the same. Yeah. Again, this is why I'm like really struggling to understand this data measure. Okay, I would recommend, my recommendation is that this particular data measure change to be at least 2 municipal assets are created or updated annually within each, I would recommend within each priority neighborhood. But if we want to say high density areas, that's fine. Does anybody have opinions on that recommendation?
So that would be annually each priority neighborhood would see 2 projects implemented, assets implemented. That sounds like a lot, but I'm for it.
Yeah, keep in mind, guys, like that might be a highly and strangers requirement because this is an entire plan for the entirety of the city of Fitchburg. So I think, yes, we are right in terms of trying to clarify the definition of high density area because just the layman's term definition pretty much puts that as, an area where a large number of people are building are concentrated within a relatively small space. So within the city of Fitchburg, how many regions do we consider high density? And as Ari kind of previously mentioned, how do we then define those? Like, do we have a set on map of Fitchburg that displays the high density area? Hence, we can plan for those particular area, see which of the healthy neighborhood in this case, which affects our direct community, are impacted or classified as high density area, and hence maybe be able to plan for development in those particular region. But yes, having the limitation or having an expectation of too new development is also estrangerous in terms of, having that in a governing document as a requirement or a metrics measurement. But that measurement itself can be modified, I believe, as we are kind of stating here, to see if we can amend that particular measurement, either to not specify a number or to specify that both upkeeping developments as well as addition of new developments, but not necessarily having a number requirement to that. But at the same time, having a number requirements to that helps the city plan ahead as well. And as has been raised in this meeting, when it comes to funding, it helps the city have a target as to what it wants to create in the nearest future, and hence can drive towards funding those proposed projects or developments.
I don't know how much time we have to see all this. We're looking at questions and answers from either the developer, the city, or the contractor, whoever the persons are. But I believe is that whoever wrote this might not know all the implications involved, stating it's a 5-year plan. So I'm gonna chip in a little bit of an idea. So why we might say high density area, a lot of those can change within just a few months because people move around a lot and new developments come up a lot. So from where I'm staying, I'm seeing a building coming up that might be housing at least nothing less than 5,000 people. And that is that. So that could even swing that area to a very high density area. So why we leave it a high density area, we can easily say, okay, high density, then the priority neighborhoods should be considered first. Then whoever is not in that priority neighborhood can be balloted or like in terms of like a lottery. So that way the high density areas are all captured. Our own priority neighborhoods are all captured. Then whoever is not within that priority neighborhood might just be balloted or lotteried. Kind of, just to make sure everybody gets a piece of the development. Thank you.
I want to make sure I understand your comment. So are you recommending that you would be in favor of talking about priority neighborhoods getting assets before other parts of the city? Is that kind of what you're saying? Or
yes, that's okay. What I'm trying to refer to.
Yeah.
So keep
Lovely.
the high density still where they want it to be, but priority neighborhoods take the first cut in the development. Then whoever that is not within that priority neighborhood, as the case might be within the plan for the city, can be lotteried or balloted, kind of.
Jessica, can you check your email? I just emailed you a URL to the current zoning map for City of Fitchburg, and it shows an awful lot of high density residential areas, and it would be very, very interesting to consider a requirement that every single one of those brown areas gets 2 new projects every year. I don't know, can you share your screen?
Jeremy, can you share my screen, please?
So the brown is labeled as HDR, high density residential. And each one of those areas could theoretically be considered its own high density residential zone, I guess. So yeah, I don't think that this data measure makes much sense. So Mark, one thing that makes me think that the consultant came up with this recommendation out of thin air is because the last version of the document had a objective 2, which was to, it was, goodness, I'm not going to get the wording exactly right, but it was basically to have this like online interactive map to show neighborhoods and essentially show if they're like kind of good neighborhoods and not so great neighborhoods, which would have led to, you know, in my opinion, more segregation. And when questioned further, the consultant explained, yeah, this was an idea that I had on my own, but it wasn't really, you know, from anybody else. So the consultant is not beyond, you know, just kind of grabbing ideas. So that's partly where I'm guessing. So yeah, so based on this map, I recommend either removing that data measure or changing it. Okay. For time purposes, I'm going to make a recommended amendment and then we can vote on it unless anybody else has a recommended amendment.
Sounds like a plan.
My recommended amendment is, for this data measure, at least 2 municipal assets created or updated annually for each priority neighborhood. I mean, I still think that 2 is way too many, but she said 2, so I'm going with 2.
Could I just ask a clarifying question? Because I think I'm reading the document differently. I'm reading it to say 2 total, not per neighborhood. So at least 2 assets are planned annually for high density areas. So
That is correct. I think
You're
you
correct.
are correct as 2 total annually for high density areas collectively. So any of those 2 can go into any of the high density areas. But as Ari also mentioned, I think we as our community should focus on prioritizing and highlighting the need of those developments in the Healthy Neighborhood Committee, or that being stipulated in this data measurement.
Okay, then can I just make the recommendation instead that the completely changing the amendment on the table, I would like to, remove the current amendment from being voted on,
Yes.
and instead propose a new amendment or a new thing to vote on, which is at least 2 new municipal assets are planned annually for priority neighborhoods.
Well, if we're going to vote on this, you got to get a motion made in a second, and we didn't get either one on what you proposed, right? So we're still
No,
just in
this
discussion.
is, exactly.
We're just in discussion.
We're
fine.
in discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, I make that movement, that motion.
a clarifying question again.
Yep.
Are you asking to so the 2 new or updated assets are now only to be assigned to priority neighborhoods and not to high density neighborhoods in general? Am I understanding correctly?
Yeah, that was the intention, although now the amendment that's on the table does not say new or updated. It just says new. We could amend the amendment.
Can we amend the amendment to, because I feel like if we just exclude high density alone or just have it list priority neighborhoods alone, I feel like that limits the rest of the city entirely, right? Can we have it as priority neighborhood and high density areas? So that way we are inclusive. And then when the time comes to select where those development go, then that could be up for additional discussion. However, keep in mind, this is just a data metrics and measurement of metrics and doesn't necessarily govern the development or where those development necessarily will be going. So this is just a measurement of metrics. So that way we need to be as inclusive as possible in that measurement. What do you guys think?
Fine with me. Okay, I remove the amendment that is currently on the table, and instead, I propose an amendment that says at least 2 municipal assets are created or updated every year for priority neighborhoods or high-density areas.
I would like to modify that for rather than and to be and or high density area. If I may. Ari.
Yeah, sure.
In that case, I would second that motion.
All right. If anybody is in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I also had concerns around objective 3.3. It says proposals for new services or programs should only be considered if they are directly referenced to one of the city's adopted strategic planning documents. And the way I'm reading this, it seems to be saying that all new services and programs will only be considered if they're part of this document that's being written.
I can clarify on that. So
Please.
right now we are updating the Healthy Neighborhoods Strategic Plan, and there's a bike and pedestrian plan. There's economic development has a plan for the entire city of Fitchburg. So what they're referring to here is each of those individual strategic plans that the city has.
Okay. And Jessica, would you know, where does the police facility fall in that? Is that in some other committee's strategic plan?
The police facility?
Correct. So I'm trying to understand how the police facility has, fits into this strategic plan that we're talking about here, this new strategic plan. And it seems to be suggesting to me that services and programs would be considered only if they're in a strategic plan of some kind. If the police facility is not listed in any strategic plan, would we not build the police facility?
No.
Okay.
The police facility, the police facility is its own entity. I think what you're asking here, this is more focused on, like I said, the strategic plans that the city creates. So I think the police facility is separate from this.
Are there other projects that are being excluded from this recommendation? Because then objective 3.4 says that every new project needs to make financial sense. Are there other projects, big projects that would cost multi-million dollars that are being excluded from this section of the document that you know of?
I do not know of them. That would be, so that process the council would have to go through and approve these projects. Hypothetically, in the future, staff would not be the ones creating these projects.
A lot of this goes to the CIP, which the mayor submits every other year, and then the council votes on it. That police facility has been voted on, discussed, and I'm not sure where it is now, but I know it's come to the council several times. they've had city meetings. So whether it's going to sit in here directly, I wouldn't see it sitting in here. This is an overarching document.
This is to guide every city department for the next 5 years. So that includes police, that includes fire, that includes economic development, that includes planning and zoning, that includes public works. It's kind of like Mark said, the overarching document to guide city staff. And city staff as well as council.
My next question is with objective 4.3, part B. It says, explore customer relationship management software tools that track resident interactions by name or address, a way to make resident interactions sortable and to share notes between departments. And I was wondering, this sounds like extra work for staff and potentially alders. And my concern is that it would take away from other important work. Important work such as doing the things that I want this committee to be working on, prioritizing language access, prioritizing, the housing committee has priorities, all of these other priorities, right? And if staff time is working on updating other tools, that potentially takes away time. Jessica, do you have any insight into whether this would be a lot of extra work or just a little bit of extra work or anything like that?
I don't have any insight on that. Just as this is saying explore, so it's not guaranteed that this would happen. I think that that administration would start there. Administration would start with looking at it to see if it's feasible within the city.
Okay. Those were my questions.
Question for you, Jess. Are you familiar of what the current performance management tools there are that you guys currently utilize within the department or for the city as a whole currently? Just tying back to the main objective there, which is 4.3.
To clarify, are you asking for performance management for city staff? Or are you...
The city utilize as a whole, that the city staffs utilize as a whole for the city of Fitchburg?
Right now, to my knowledge, I do not know of any I think we're looking at, it said customer relationship management system that we have within the city.
No, but I think he's talking about part A, not part B. Sorry, I wasn't on mic. I mentioned, I think he's talking about part A while I was talking about part B. So 4.3 part A talks about performance reviews.
In terms of performance reviews, the city holds those with staff members annually. There is HR does have a guide, but there's not a specific software system that the city uses.
Thank you.
Is it NeoGov?
Jeremy says yes, it's NeoGov, and it exists.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if we want to like collectively look at objective 3.2 because it is pointed toward the priority neighborhoods. So just even collectively look over it and see is I think among the most relevant to our work on this committee. I don't have any specific questions or suggestions, but just thought it would be good for us all to look at it together.
I was going to bring that up. I think that's a good idea, and it looks like that's our piece of this. But I'm looking at this whole thing, having worked in an organization that has several strategic plans over the course of the year, and they start at the top, and then it filters down to the departments, whether it's your HR system, whether it is affordable housing, but this is, I think we're at the macro level up here at the top. And if this is what we want to be doing under 3.2, then we can fit in what the strategic plan goes for this group. But we're getting into the weeds with a lot of this stuff. I think my question, as I said, as a taxpayer is, where's the money coming from for all this? And I think that we need to go back as we look at an approval of this, where's the money coming from with all those ranges, and has the council, and our alder's not here tonight to answer that, because Jessica, I'm looking at you, I'm assuming this has already gone to the council, right, or not?
Yes, council's seen this. It's been referred back to our committee and then the equity committee,
Okay.
and then it will go back to council.
Okay. But I think that would be in our purview to take that one, tear that one apart and what's in there. Again, I think it gives a special focus on it, and it talks about money being awarded to it and investing more funding in neighborhood efforts. So we need to find out what the benchmarks are. Anyway, my 2 cents.
Do people think that this objective, so when I'm reading this objective, it almost sounds very similar to me to the grant program that we already have. Do people think that this is intended to be an addition? Because, I mean, that would be amazing to have more money for our programs. Or is it like also trying to talk about the grant program that already exists? Yeah.
I think it is. I think this is just the city saying what its purpose or its objective is, and both pre-existing and new initiatives would be captured under that objective that is 3.2.
That makes a lot of sense. The reason that I bring up the question is because objective 3.2A says explore the creation and funding of neighborhood level microgrant programs. And I'm like, well, we have a grant program, so are we creating a new one? I would love to create a new one. I would love to create a second grant program. That sounds wonderful.
I don't think we're getting a new program. I think we got to enhance what we have. And if it means asking more money, what we had, that's one thing. But I don't see them creating another program. Now, Jessica, maybe I'm wrong.
Keep in mind, guys, this is also a 5-year plan, so maybe later in the future, we could possibly have room to create more different grants as funds remain available or become available. So I think that's open for future discussion as well. So it's nice to have that option available as an objective.
When I read this, I interpret it as saying it may be the creation or extension of the grant program we have now. It would just be a different type of grant. Right now, our grants fund people who are providing services, whereas this objective states that the grant that they're proposing are resident-led grants for public safety, public arts, or community building initiatives.
Yeah, then I think it makes a lot of sense to bring it back to Mark's question of where's the money coming from. But otherwise, I think it's a great objective to keep in.
I would like to presume that is a question that we cannot answer within the scope of our committee.
I too would make that assumption, especially with Donald not being here. I would have no insight into the budgeting process for our program. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I have no further comments on Objective 3.2, which does partake to our committee currently. I think this fulfills majority of our pillars, or at least some of it. So I'm not sure if there's anything we want to add to the objective to better align with our goal as a healthy neighborhood committee. I'm not sure if we want to just take a look at this to see if there's any missing piece in relationship to our own, objectives.
So do you need a motion then to approve it with the questions we've raised, or is there other things on here that we missed?
I would like to just bring one other question. I not having been a part of the strategic planning process, I think I'm not always clear on what the scope is. But when we look at goal number 5, I think it is connected to the communication strategy. I think that we've talked a lot on this committee just about language access and seeing some sort of nod towards language access or multilingualism within that strategy, I think would be a useful thing to add to the strategic plan. It could go just about anywhere. But I'm curious what others think, or is that beyond the scope of this document? Or is that already built in a way that...
That is an amazing point to raise. And yes, I think it might kind of stipulate that, but not clearly. It doesn't clearly give room for diversity in language of communication. I think section maybe 5.1 B and C, the utilization of AI template, note taken, but that's just for translation availability in English and Spanish, for example, would be the case, but nothing specifically speaks on the diversity of such communication tools or exactly what array we're looking to cover in terms of being able to provide that particular service. So I think adding that specification would be valuable, particularly to Objective 5.1.
Does anyone have thoughts on whether it would be best to add it to Part C that was talking about AI note-taking, or to create a Part F there that talks about language access? Okay, well, I'll answer my own question. I think that it would make most sense to create a Part F, especially since just translating notes only helps people after the fact. It doesn't help anyone during the meeting. And so language access would be much more encompassing of other barriers to civic engagement.
I would concur with that, and I'm aligned with that suggestion as well.
So 5.1F That's the recommendation?
Yes, that would be to include an additional subject line, 5.1F, that describes diversity or evaluation of, I guess I would let you phrase that in as best fit. Kathleen, did you catch that?
Yeah, I think I'm one. So I could think through a way to articulate that. I would probably need a little bit of time. I'm wondering if in the objective title though, embrace a variety of. I'm just wondering if we want to describe the mediums as multilingual. I don't know if that's, like embrace a variety of multilingual social, email, and print mediums to consistently reach Fitchburg residents. If we kind of want it as an overarching aspect of the communication strategy, does that make sense?
If we do that, then we would still need to find a data measure to be able to ensure that we're holding the city accountable to actually fulfilling that objective, if included in the title as 5.1 in that manner. But yes, we can resume first by including that in the objective title, but then we'll still need to find a way to define a data measure or include a data measure in one of these segments or tie it together to be able to actually account for that.
I love that idea. Caitlin, did you want to have a motion to change the language of objective 5.1? Can you put that on the table?
Yes, I can. I don't have an F proposal yet, so I don't know how we want to,
It would probably be two different motions. So we could just have like the First Amendment motion first, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So my motion would be to change the language in objective 5.1 to include the word multilingual, so embrace a variety of multilingual social, email, and print mediums to consistently reach Fitchburg residents.
I would like to second that motion.
All in favor? Say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Do we?
I can then set a second motion to modify section objective 5.1 to include an initiative objective which captures a data measure for, how do I word this? Just a moment while I gather my.
I don't know if there's currently a language access policy as it relates to communications. If not, it seems like it would be worthwhile to propose the development of a language access policy related to communications as part of maybe part F.
That's a good proposal. City representative, are we aware if that exists currently?
Currently, there is no language access policy.
Any discussion around language access policy? Benefits or hassle in development or hesitations? Kathleen, would you like to make a motion?
So I think the motion would be to add a part F that says to develop language access policies for official city communication tools.
I would like to second that motion, if no other amendments or addition as stated.
Okay, so I was working really quickly to try and get some help from ChatGPT, and I got some more verbiage that kind of expands on what you're talking about, Caitlin. Would you? What would be the best way to do this? I could read it out loud and then I could email it to people if people are interested.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Can you read that loud real quick?
Yeah, so it says goal, develop and implement a comprehensive language access policy that ensures all residents, regardless of English proficiency, can access essential city services, participate fully in civic life, and contribute to decision-making processes. This initiative aims to break down linguistic barriers to engagement by providing multilingual resources, interpretation services, and culturally competent communication strategies across all departments.
I think that, oh, could I?
I don't have your email address.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Caitlin, go ahead.
I just want to note that, so I love that. I think it's really important for the city of Fitchburg. And I think that because this falls, my thinking was to build it into the communication specifically because it's already, it wouldn't be a whole other initiative. So I was thinking more directly focused on communications, although I, believe that all, in open access and language access to all departments, I was finding a way to kind of fit it into the communications initiative. So that feels like a small, narrower scope than what ChatGPT came up with.
Understood. Okay, the new recommendation is establish, so I told it, narrow the scope to fall within the communications department only. Establish a language access policy within the communications department to ensure that all public-facing materials, announcements, and engagement efforts are inclusive of residents with limited English proficiency. This initiative will reduce linguistic barriers to civic participation by prioritizing multilingual communications, accessible interpretation protocols, and culturally responsive messaging strategies. I'm not sure that it adds a lot to what you already said, Caitlin, which was already very nice, but that is an option.
Yeah, I think we could, again, I don't know how much time we have to kind of think through this. I think that there, especially at least the first chunk of that text felt like it was something we could probably propose as an amendment. We may not need all of the details, but I'm wondering, Ari, if looking at it, can you kind of simplify it a little bit and propose something related? Would that work?
Yeah, Ari, I think you could actually take out like the last three words or the last three words actually. I think that would actually summarize it nice without getting too far into too much details and specifics. I think all the way to the point where you mentioned, you might have to rephrase that again, and then I'll notify you exactly what a good. You guys catch that?
Okay, the email is being sent so that people can all see the language that we're talking about and go from there.
I think the first sentence of that statement would be sufficient. What do others think?
I think that sounds wonderful.
Yep. Concur with that.
Okay, I move, or Caitlin, did you want to make the motion?
You can go ahead.
Okay. I move that we add a section F to objective 5.1 that says the following: establish a language access policy within the communications department to ensure that all public facing materials, announcements, and engagement efforts are inclusive of residents with limited English proficiency.
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Aye.
Lovely. Motion carries unanimously. Would we like to create any data measures for this objective? We could have a data measure around, was there a policy created? We could have a data measure around, say 50% of all major public communications are translated to X, Y, and Z language by the end of 2026, or, within some time frame. Or maybe other objectives.
It would make sense for the data measure to be based on where we stand currently with translating documents, and I just don't know where we stand. Like the 50%, are we already translating documents? I just don't know. Jessica, do you have a sense for that?
I do know that staff does translate some documents. I cannot provide a percentage number, but I think it depends on department, on who's translating or not. But in terms of metrics, I don't have specific metrics, but I do know that staff does translate some documents. Oh, go.
We would like to recognize Jeremy. Thank you.
So Jeremy, FACTv, Communications, just to help on the process, I would say I couldn't put a percentage on, what's translated, what's not. Everything that goes out on the website has the ability to be translated to multiple languages. You can change that and have it. So if you're trying to make some measurables, I'd make it more like, you're going to have to be really specific on, like, is it posters? Is it, the notify me's that are going out? Is it the I would look at the communications that are out there. So maybe go kind of globally, like evaluate all communication tools, which we are. Side note, there's a communications, we hired a communications firm that's reviewing all communications at this time. So they may actually come out with all of these things that you guys are making recommendations on anyways. But to get to the point, the majority of the stuff that's going out, I think you want to be really specific on it. Is it on the website? Because the website already offers that. Is it social media? That is where you could pick on an area like, do you want, and what languages too? You're being really broad here, which is good, but I think it's going to be hard for city staff to pick 1, 2, 3, how many different languages do you want to provide? So maybe you put that in the evaluation tool as well. Like, is it English, Spanish, Hmong, how far do you want us to go, and how far, what do you want to know for data points too? Like how many times it goes out, how many times because we put out a lot of information. I don't know if that helps.
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much for that insight. I was going to just suggest an example of metrics that could be measured would be maybe a % of residents satisfied with language access. Via annual survey could be an example of one of those. I don't know what we currently rate at the current moment, if we've even evaluated that in the previous times.
How would we get that data though?
That could be conducted via city survey. I'm not sure if we have those currently.
We do put out a lot of surveys, but they're pretty difficult to get people engaged in. So you might need some other tools or measurables.
I really like the idea of having one of the measures be evaluate the languages spoken and identify the needs for translation. Since it seems like this committee doesn't necessarily have that information yet, that would be a really great data measure. Yeah.
What we do have, I want to respond back to my earlier comment. This is the top. We're dealing with the very top of the pyramid up here, and we got to get our way down into the objectives and the agenda. These are the things that the city's saying they're going to work on. Communication, obviously, is one of them. And I think it will trickle down. So we do need to give our feedback on what should be on the things that sit down below that overall objective. But I do know that with the Bike and Ped Commission, we put a lot of stuff in Spanish because we've had several events over at the fountains where we had it all translated as it came in. But I think they also are trying to work on communication because people said during the last year, during the referendum, that nobody knew about it. The police station, nobody knew about it. Despite the fact, and Jeremy, look, am I wrong? Go ahead, am I wrong?
We've heard a lot of feedback.
Yeah, and that we got to get the information. They're trying to do a better job of getting the information out. So finding out who's not getting it, we do got to find that out. But that's the key is so all the citizens are getting the same communication. If it's in a language, we know the breakdown of Spanish-speaking people in this city. They've got, the CETA group has that information. Who speaks Hmong? Who speaks whatever? And so we've got that. And it can go from there. But I think I'm just seeing this, again, overall as an overarching plan for over 5 years. We're not going to get to all that in year one. And then the city will make themselves and say, year one, we're going to do this, year two, this. And then it's also going to come down to funding. So, I mean, I'm looking at this more closely than I looked at when I first reviewed it, and there's a lot of good stuff in here. But there's a lot of work. And the question to our staff in the city, what's going to get done so that this gets done?
And I think it's priorities, right? Like you put you're laying the high level. You've got the input from the staff. You got the input from the elected officials. All of your guys' comments will go in there as well. And then, but how are we going to pick as you move forward out of that 5-year plan? I think it's actually in there on the initiatives, but that will be decided I think every year, and you'll keep pulling this plan out, keep updating it. At the high level. And I think the budget stuff too, I think there'll be budget items added to it if they can take on those priorities at that point and establish those. That was the way that, I think staff would bring that forward to you and say, this is what it's going to take to do that. And specifically in the language or in the communications front, we're using a lot of tools, a lot of different pieces. If we want to go further with, especially the language pieces, you know, I can tell you as staff, we put those in there and they've been, either they're put into budget and taken out of budget. So it's, a lot of the stuff is already happening too behind the scenes. The language stuff's a big one. That's happening behind the scenes. You may not see it every day, but there's efforts there. I think what you put in the plan is we want to enhance the accessibility of everyone, X, Y, Z, you know, look at it more globally, if that makes sense. And to Mark's point, I think keep it kind of high level, but you can go into those points and, you know, do what you're doing.
So I emailed everyone an example of potential language for a data measure that tries to incorporate all of the discussion that we had here, which is develop a language access policy that evaluates language access needs and current translation processes within different communication tools. I'm sure that we could wordsmith it and make it better, but that is a potential example of how we could phrase it. And it's, you know, is this policy created? Does it address these questions that we have?
You're looking at me, I'm okay. I mean, I think we need to get through this and get some closure on what staff can take back to get this done. And I think if that's going to help move it forward, then fine, because it will come down to the council's going to take all our feedback with the consultants and make the final document. That's what will get voted on.
Okay, I make a
I think, you know, I just want to say real quickly, one thing that we know about the strategic plan, if I understood all the documents correctly, is that it lacks input from specifically Spanish-speaking community members, and I'm sure other non-English speaking community members. And so I think it's good to have the language access piece a part of it to kind of bring that voice into the document and really set forth the intention of reaching non-English speaking residents. So I think your metric is good. But I just want to say, I think that's, for me, a big part of why this is important, is knowing that this document, you know, that the process lacked that input this time around. So hopefully, you know, in the next 5 years, it will be in a better position to reflect the voices of folks who weren't in this process. Ari, I'd love to hear your proposal.
I think that that's a point well taken, and I think that speaks to the importance of adding this objective and data measure or initiative. I think I'm using the wrong terminology, not objective. But yes, I completely agree with what you're saying, Caitlin. I would like to make a motion, for sake of time, I would like to make a motion to add the following data measure underneath 5.1F. The following data measure would say, develop a language access policy that evaluates language access needs and current translation processes within different communication tools.
I'll second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, any more discussion on, I mean, this was an incredible discussion. Any more discussion on this document? Lovely. Okay. We are moving on to the next agenda item, which is 5B. Healthy Neighborhood Strategic Plan Data Review. So Jessica very nicely sent along in the agenda packet some data for us to review. Jessica, would you like to present and take it away?
Yeah, Jeremy, can you stop sharing while I grab this, please? Okay, we're good. So what I've done here, this proposed data will be used for the Healthy Neighborhood Strategic Plan update, and will kind of help guide for each neighborhood. And how this data was pulled is our ArcGIS specialist mapped out on GIS each specific neighborhood. So Southdale, North Fish Hatchery, Belmar, and Verona Road West. So all of these numbers that you're seeing are pulled specifically from those boundaries. And then I went in further and selected variables. So we're working within ArcGIS, there were variables, and then I selected poverty, health insurance, race, income, age, and languages. And then they're further broken down into multiple variables that you can see here, where on the top, you can compare the entire city to all 4 priority neighborhoods.
Jessica, is there any particular input that you would like from us as far as like, are you looking for, is this data useful, or like, is there a question for us?
Yeah, so it's more of a discussion amongst the committee, but yes, we are looking to have an understanding of, is this useful? Do these variables align with what we are looking for from the Healthy Neighborhoods update? Will it be are these good guiding metrics for the update? Because as we move forward, these numbers will be compared year after year to see the change.
Jessica, am I understanding correctly that this data would be used as like a measurement of whether programming is improving quality of life within the in the priority neighborhoods?
So they may not be used specifically. As we work through the planning process, I would bring forth like data measurements, specific ones based on the goal. What this is helping us to understand are the demographics of each neighborhood. And then also, so for example, with health insurance, it's showing individuals who have no health insurance, or if they do have health insurance. And within each neighborhood, if they lack health insurance, that would show or give us an understanding that maybe we should allocate more healthcare resources to those neighborhoods. So can we partner with the county to have vaccination clinics, or can we have students from the university bring programming in, things of that nature. So what these variables are aiming to do is show us potentially where the priority neighborhoods need support, but then also demonstrate the demographics. So that would include languages, race. With languages, like you guys were speaking about earlier, where do we need to translate? What languages should we translate to? Things of that nature.
So I know this would be more work. I think it would be incredibly interesting to have data, year after year on a neighborhood that is not a priority neighborhood, so that we could see, just as an example, poverty rates. I'm just going to use like one data point as an example. So percent of households who fit the poverty threshold, in Southdale, 21%. Let's say, next year it is still 21%, but then you see like the poverty rate decreasing in some non-priority neighborhood, then you can start asking like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting. Like poverty is decreasing in other areas, but it's staying constant in the priority neighborhoods, right? So you could get just a little bit more information about how the city in general is doing.
Yeah, so if you look at the first column, it's comparing the city of Fitchburg to all 4 of the neighborhoods.
Good
so
point.
Those statistics that you're seeing in that first column, like what you said, percent of households experiencing poverty, it's showing that for the city it's 8%, whereas for Southdale you're seeing 21%. So it is showing that disparity there between the city and the 4 priority neighborhoods.
Thanks for pointing that out.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I think that one thing that's interesting to note about at least Southdale, but I think probably all priority neighborhoods are similar, is that there's a lot of transients. And so a lot of the information will change, not because people's conditions have changed, but because they've left and new people are living here. I don't know if there's a way to track that, but I think that would be really important data to be able to look at, like how is a neighborhood being impacted by initiatives, for example, versus just some people leaving and new people coming.
Yeah, that's a great point, to see if we could potentially find a variable of how often are people moving in and out of these neighborhoods, because it would give us a better benchmark of understanding, okay, well, if people are rotating every 2 to 3 years, then maybe we should benchmark every 2 to 3 years to see how those numbers are changing and when new people potentially move in. So yeah, I'll look on GIS and see if they have a variable that would be similar, that would align with that, because that is definitely something I overlooked and I think is a great point.
Are there any variables available to do with like, I don't know, like criminal justice? So for example, people from these neighborhoods, are they getting a lot of citations? Are they, I don't know, is there like a adult from this household currently incarcerated? I'm trying to think of statistics that could be interesting and potentially available.
What I do know is available, through the police department, they can offer how many calls for service they're getting per neighborhood, and I have talked with them about getting those metrics. I haven't received them yet, but they can provide that. And then there is also within ArcGIS, I believe, a crime variable. I don't know kind of what that variable is measuring in terms of crime, but I do remember seeing that there is something related to crime. So to my knowledge, the police department can offer us calls for service for each neighborhood, and then we can look at ArcGIS in terms of their crime. They might have like a crime index, and with an index, it's made up of different variables.
I'm also wondering about maybe like political voice in some way. Like how many emails to alders there are, or like voter participation rates isn't really what I'm going for. There's a lot of barriers to actually voting, but some part of political voice. Maybe that's too broad.
With the software system that I used, there were no questions pertaining to political voice or activism, and we would have to distinguish and determine why we were including those variables, and what programming or goals we would have based off of those variables. So those would be my initial comments on that.
Ari, I think voters' turnout rate might be the closest readily available variable that you might be able to pull, but I'm not sure how much information that provides.
Can you repeat the first part of that? I didn't catch it.
I said voters' turnout rate might be the most accessible variable or data point speaking on the same subject matter that's available, but I'm not sure how much help that would or how much information we can gather from that or deduce from that, rather.
Right, exactly. I'm not sure how useful that particular data would be towards drawing any sort of conclusions, but I mean, it could be interesting to track. Yeah. Was there anything in here about food deserts?
So for food, what we do have pulled is who is using food stamps or SNAP benefits. In terms of food deserts, the initial data that I had collected through the EPA determined if the area was a food desert or not, but that was by census blocks. This is, like I said, this is specifically to these neighborhoods. So our GIS staff person drew the boundaries, and so these are a lot more precise. Whereas if we used the EJ screen through the EPA to determine if it's a food desert, that's going to be pulling data from other geographical regions that are not the priority neighborhoods.
Is there any other feedback that you're looking for from us, do you think?
For the variables, do you all think that something needs added? Do the variables align with kind of what we may predict the goals and objectives of the plan may be?
Well, I think you've gotten the committee's group about and feedback about the data points they want to see added and revised and changed. So you've got to, I guess my sense is that tool's going to be a working document. It should give you a starting point. And things will still evolve and change as it goes through that 5-year cycle if it's used appropriately. But no, I think we're getting there. I mean, it's beginning to look like a picture or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, I don't know, this data specifically is not for the city's plans?
Right, I know.
Okay,
I
the
know.
healthy neighborhoods.
Right. No, I've got one I want to bring up before we break, which is more on the neighborhood hub up there, which doesn't get into our stuff right now, so I'll just save that comment for later.
Can you remind me for language variables, what does API mean? Speak API language?
I don't know specifically. I can look it up. When I took it, I just took everything that was available, but I would have to look and see what this specific data source labeled that as. And that can I can pull that up, but I'll have to go through the information, and they have a whole report that shows how they've done these things.
I'd be curious, but it's low priority. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if I don't understand what API is, then I don't think that line item is too useful. Okay. But that would be my only other thought on that.
Yeah, so I guess my largest concern or question was if you all thought anything needed added that maybe I had overlooked in terms of variables, because this is going to essentially paint the picture for the neighborhoods and help determine, like I said, where the support will be. Of course, we're going to collect qualitative data during the summer and go out into each neighborhood and ask questions and for feedback in that sense. But for people who like to see numbers and specific metrics, this is kind of where we would be looking. So we're looking at poverty, health insurance, which for me determines, how does their health care look, race, income, age, and then language. And I also have a couple other variables that aren't included. One of them has transportation. There was only one variable that really showed that. And the other ones are also a little offhanded, but they can be included as well. And all of these statistics, they won't be used, but it does, like I said, it's there to help paint the picture of what the neighborhoods, how the demographics look.
I think the census also provides data on education, like high school graduation rates and stuff like that. That could potentially be useful.
Yes, they do provide that. Let me see if I pulled that. I don't think that I did. So I'll add a note in here to pull some education.
Any other comments on this agenda item? Lovely. Thank you so much for doing that work and for bringing it to us. Report from department, agenda item 6.
Okay, so the first report is that our urban forester, Anna, updated me that there has been some trees planted within the healthy neighborhood. So 24 new trees were planted in Southdale, 18 in Traceway, and then 18 as well in Hugo Jamestown. For the hub, it's still slated to be completed late summer, early fall. And I met with the deputy administrator about talking about coordination for the hub and how that might look. And then for our next 2 meetings, we are going to invite the 2024 grantees to come in and present about their projects and how they went and how the grant supported them.
Any questions for staff? Agenda item number 7, announcements.
I'm going to bring mine up that I was going to bring up. It's not so much an announcement. It ties into what Jessica said. We got a hub opening up. It's up there in one of our priority neighborhoods, and I'd like to see how we can get the people that live up there engaged, and I would use the alder as well as a part of that also, but how we can get them engaged and respond to the needs they have. Some of the data points we talked exactly about tonight, but I think I continue to hear we got a communication issue. And I think we need to figure out what's different, what can we do up there to help as a city. I know for a fact we just took a neighborhood walk over by off of Seminole Highway, that neighborhood, the Allied Drive neighborhood, 2 weeks ago, and had about 20 people participate. Those are the kind of things that I think get folks engaged. So I guess I haven't heard anything, Jessica, yet, other than this thing's getting ready to open up there. And how's it going to be used as a community resource? And would it be good to bring someone from the city who's got that vision? Just a suggestion. I'm done. It wasn't an announcement, but it was on my agenda.
I can, because the initial staff person, Scott, who was working with the hub, Wade did it. Well, yes, Wade. Wade started the hub, and then it transferred to to Scott, and now Adam is kind of working with it. So with the conversation I had, we just discussed, how can we invite the public into this space? What's that going to look like? And nothing is set in stone yet, but I would agree that it would be good to have a staff member come in and discuss as we get closer.
We could use it as a pilot up there as we look at other things in these 3 other neighborhoods. I mean, there's your big thing you're talking about. There's a investment of money by the city to build this thing. There's also a greenway up there they're working on for biking and walking. So there's 2 things up in it, as I call the Leopold neighborhood, that are going to be positive benefits. We need to celebrate them and use them, I think, as things we can learn from. So that's all good.
Another announcement, the Leopold Tito Fest happened this past weekend, and it was a very happy event with lots of excited kiddos and happy families. So it was a great connection event. All right, hearing no other announcements, can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Mark.
I second the motion.
Beautiful. All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, meeting adjourned at 7:15 p.m. Thank you, everybody.